Imagine waking up with nothing. No walls, no bed, no certainty of food. The streets of Florida aren't just sidewalks. They're battlefields where survival is a daily fight. Homelessness isn't just about losing a home. It's about losing dignity, mental stability, and hope. COVID-19 shattered lives, addiction tightened its grip, and the system turned a blind eye. But behind the statistics are real people, trapped in an unforgiving cycle. Tonight, we step into their world. The hunger, the isolation, the silent screams society refuses to hear. Are we watching, or are we just ignoring? Welcome to Globe Path Travel Documentary, exploring untold realities. Florida's streets hold stories few dare to tell. Stories of survival, loss, and resilience. Beneath the city lights and tourist attractions, thousands fight for shelter, struggling against addiction, mental health challenges, and a system that turns its back on them. Tonight, we step into their world, the makeshift homes, the silent battles, and the harsh truths. This isn't just a documentary, it's a reality check. Are you ready to witness the unseen? Florida's homelessness crisis, the silent collapse of a system. The streets of Florida tell a painful, unsettling story, one that many ignore, yet thousands live through every single day. In 2025, homelessness has reached catastrophic levels, with over 28,000 people forced to survive without shelter, food security, or medical care. While tourists marvel at Florida's sunny beaches and thriving nightlife, a hidden population fights for survival beneath overpasses, in tent encampments, and outside shuttered storefronts. This crisis didn't happen overnight. It has been brewing for years, fueled by skyrocketing housing costs, economic instability, addiction, and the collapse of social safety nets. Cities like Miami, Orlando, and Tampa have become hotspots for the crisis. Once known for their prosperity, these urban centers are now filled with makeshift shelters, with entire streets lined with tents and tarps where families, veterans, and individuals seeking refuge have settled. Miami's downtown, a place once alive with opportunity, now feels like a battlefield of survival, where panhandlers, displaced workers, and mentally ill individuals roam in search of the next meal, the next shelter, the next chance to escape. Orlando, a city associated with tourism and entertainment, hides an ugly truth behind the bright lights. Hotels and theme parks flourish, while thousands of residents are pushed onto the streets due to unaffordable rent and systemic failures. In Tampa, overcrowded shelters and a rising number of people living in cars signal the deepening of this crisis, proving that homelessness isn't just a statistic. It's a human tragedy unfolding in real time. The causes of Florida's homelessness epidemic are complex, yet deeply connected to economic failure and systemic neglect. Rent prices have skyrocketed, making affordable housing almost impossible to obtain for low-income individuals. A wave of evictions and foreclosures has displaced thousands, forcing them into a cycle that is nearly impossible to break. Mental health struggles play a massive role. Without proper treatment, those suffering from conditions like depression, PTSD, and schizophrenia find themselves unable to hold jobs or afford basic necessities. Many turn to substance abuse, further fueling the downward spiral of addiction and survival-driven crime. Yet, perhaps the most painful part of this crisis is the indifference. Policymakers talk about solutions, but shelters remain overcrowded, and rehabilitation programs remain underfunded and inaccessible. Advocates warn that without urgent action, the situation will only continue to worsen. And while organizations fight to provide meals and emergency care, the root of the problem, lack of systemic change, failing healthcare, and unaffordable housing, remains unresolved. This is Florida's reality, a place where wealth and poverty collide, where skyscrapers and luxury condos overlook streets lined with tents, and where survival isn't guaranteed for thousands living in the shadows. The question remains, how much longer will society turn away? Survival on Florida's streets. The brutal reality. Life on the streets of Florida isn't just difficult. It's inhumane. Thousands who have lost their homes are left with nothing but the bare concrete beneath them, battling the scorching heat, the relentless storms, and the brutal cold of winter nights. But the weather is only one of the challenges. The daily uncertainty of food, safety, and survival turns existence into a constant fight. A home reduced to concrete and cardboard. For the homeless in Florida, sidewalks and overpasses have become homes. Some piece together scraps of cardboard for warmth, while others find shelter under bridges and in abandoned buildings that offer little protection. Rainstorms soak everything they own, leaving them drenched for days, while the summer heat burns their skin as they desperately seek shade. But nature isn't the only enemy. Crime is rampant, especially in areas where homeless individuals gather for safety. With no protection from authorities and no walls to shield them, many are targets for theft, assault, and violence. Even the few possessions they hold, bags of clothes, a blanket, maybe some food, can be stolen in an instant. The collapse of hygiene and health. Without access to restrooms, showers, or clean drinking water, the health of homeless individuals deteriorates rapidly. Infections spread, wounds go untreated, and illnesses turn deadly because hospitals and clinics rarely prioritize those without insurance. Skin diseases from constant exposure, respiratory illnesses from extreme conditions, and chronic health issues worsen without medical care. Mental health also takes a devastating hit. The stress of never knowing when you'll eat next, not having a safe place to sleep, and being treated as invisible by society leads to severe depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Some turn to drugs or alcohol, not for pleasure, but just to escape the misery for a few hours. Nighttime, when survival becomes a battle. Once the sun sets, the streets become even more dangerous. Assaults rise, crime escalates, and the most vulnerable, the elderly, women, and those in poor health, are left defenseless. Many avoid sleep altogether, staying awake just to make sure they survive until morning. Shelters, though available, fill up within minutes, leaving most to fend for themselves. This isn't just poverty, it's a humanitarian crisis unfolding every night. Until real solutions are implemented, the streets will remain a battlefield where survival is never guaranteed. Florida's mental health crisis, a silent epidemic among the homeless. The homelessness crisis in Florida isn't just about losing a roof over your head, it's about losing stability, identity, and the ability to heal. For many, the struggle goes deeper than financial hardship. It's a psychological battle, worsened by a system that offers little to no support. As of 2025, mental health disorders like depression, anxiety, PTSD, and schizophrenia have reached record-breaking levels among homeless individuals with no real infrastructure in place to provide treatment. How the pandemic pushed thousands into homelessness. The aftermath of the global health crisis triggered a wave of evictions, layoffs, and financial collapse, pushing thousands onto the streets overnight. People who once had stable jobs were suddenly unemployed, unable to pay rent, and forced out of their homes with no safety net. In Florida's major cities, shelters filled beyond capacity, leaving countless individuals stranded with nowhere to go. Families were torn apart, and what was once a temporary crisis became a permanent state of survival. But it wasn't just about losing jobs. It was about losing mental stability. Isolation, grief, and trauma from those years sent depression and anxiety levels skyrocketing. For many, the psychological scars have remained long after life supposedly returned to normal mental health care. A system that has already failed. Florida's mental health infrastructure is broken. While therapy and psychiatric care exist, they aren't accessible to the homeless, who are often ignored, dismissed, or treated as a burden. Hospitals reject them, clinics require insurance, and affordable treatment is virtually non-existent. This forces many into self-medicating with alcohol and drugs, seeking temporary escape from a pain that no one is helping them heal. PTSD, anxiety, and addiction. The unseen battle for homeless individuals. Every single day is a fight for survival. The fear of being attacked at night, the humiliation of being looked down upon, the trauma of losing everything. It all compounds into severe PTSD and crippling anxiety. Many turn to substance abuse, not because they want to, but because they see no way out. Fentanyl, heroin, and meth have become common coping mechanisms, trapping people in a downward spiral with no exit. The reality check: what happens next? Without urgent mental health intervention, Florida's homeless population is not just increasing, it's deteriorating. Advocates warn that if therapy, rehab, and medical support remain out of reach, the situation will only spiral further into addiction, crime, and early deaths. The question is not just how many people are homeless, but how many are silently suffering, waiting for help that will never come. Drug addiction. Epidemic. Florida's homelessness crisis is more than just a growing statistic. It's a human catastrophe unfolding in real time, fueled by a failing system and an unforgiving cycle of addiction. While people walk through the streets of Miami, Orlando, and Tampa, immersed in daily life, thousands are fighting battles no one sees. Battles against withdrawal, against hunger, against the sheer exhaustion of trying to survive in a world that has abandoned them. With over 70% of Florida's homeless population trapped in substance abuse, addiction isn't just common, it's inescapable. Fentanyl, heroin, and meth flood the streets, each drug offering a temporary escape from the unbearable conditions of homelessness. Fentanyl is cheap and deadly, with users often unaware of how lethal each dose might be. Heroin creates a nightmare cycle, where withdrawal symptoms become so intense that recovery feels impossible. Meth keeps people awake, preventing them from falling prey to the dangers of sleeping on the streets, but in turn destroys their health, speeding up their physical and mental collapse. And for those who want to recover, who want to break free, the system offers almost nothing. Rehabilitation centers are overloaded and underfunded, turning away more people than they accept. Even those who manage to get into rehab face short-term solutions that fail to address the deep-rooted causes of addiction and homelessness. Without consistent mental health support, stable housing, or a structured reintegration plan, relapse is almost inevitable. Many find themselves back on the streets, right where they started, with even fewer options than before. The government sees these problems, yet does little to fix them. Budget cuts have crippled mental health services, meaning those suffering from PTSD, schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety are left with no path to recovery. Affordable housing has become impossible to find, pushing thousands into permanent homelessness as rent prices skyrocket beyond reach. Policymakers talk about solutions, but real change never comes. And all the while, the streets become more crowded, the shelters more overwhelmed, and the cycle more impossible to escape. This crisis is not slowing down, it is accelerating, claiming more lives each day while officials turn a blind eye. Advocates have warned that without bold policy changes, immediate funding for rehabilitation, and serious investment in housing programs, Florida will face a homelessness crisis far worse than what the public realizes. Every day, more people disappear into the system's failures, becoming just another number in reports that no one acts on. The real question is not whether Florida's homelessness crisis will worsen, it's how many more lives will be lost before anyone cares enough to fix it. The system that fails its people. How government neglect fuels Florida's homelessness crisis. Homelessness is not just the result of bad luck or personal misfortune. It is the direct consequence of a system that has abandoned its most vulnerable. Florida's streets are overflowing with displaced individuals, not because they chose this life, but because there is no clear path to escape it. With affordable housing nearly impossible to find, mental health programs collapsing due to budget cuts, and policymakers avoiding real solutions, homelessness has transitioned from a social issue to a full-blown humanitarian disaster. Housing that no one can afford. Florida's housing market has pushed thousands into homelessness, setting rent prices so high that even working-class individuals can't afford a roof over their heads. The few government-assisted housing programs available are either underfunded, overwhelmed, or burdened with waiting lists so long that people give up before ever receiving help. Rental costs have surged, and with no effective policies to regulate pricing, landlords continue to raise rates, forcing low-income families onto the streets. Those who manage to secure temporary shelter often find themselves one crisis away from eviction, with no safety net to fall back on. Without affordable housing, escaping homelessness becomes impossible, a cruel reality that Florida's government has failed to address. Mental health and rehabilitation, a system on the brink of collapse. A significant portion of Florida's homeless population suffers from mental health disorders, ranging from schizophrenia to PTSD and severe depression. Yet the services meant to help them are either non-existent or too underfunded to function effectively. Over the years, budget cuts have devastated mental health programs, leaving countless individuals without access to therapy, medication, or recovery plans. Rehabilitation centers are overcrowded, underfunded, and unable to take in new patients, meaning those battling addiction and mental illness are simply left to fend for themselves. The result? A cycle where homelessness leads to addiction, addiction worsens mental health, and mental instability prevents any chance of recovery. It's not just a broken system, it's a system designed to fail. Advocates warn, without policy reform, this will only get worse. Social workers, researchers, and advocacy groups have repeatedly warned that without urgent government intervention, Florida's homelessness crisis will spiral beyond control. Calls for increased funding for mental health care, tighter regulations on rental pricing, and more accessible rehabilitation services have largely been ignored, leaving thousands at risk. Shelters are overflowing, outreach programs are collapsing, and the streets are becoming more dangerous. And yet, policymakers continue to treat homelessness as a distant issue rather than an immediate emergency. This is not just a matter of poverty, it's a matter of government neglect, systemic failure, and a complete disregard for human lives. Until drastic action is taken, Florida's streets will continue to fill with the forgotten, the struggling, and the abandoned. And the question remains, hope amidst the darkness. Stories of survival and redemption. Though Florida's homelessness crisis paints a bleak picture of neglect and suffering, there are beacons of hope, organizations and individuals who refuse to let people slip through the cracks. While the streets remain overcrowded, dangerous, and unforgiving, there are fighters, survivors, and advocates proving that recovery is possible, even against the odds. The unsung heroes. Organizations fighting for change. Despite overwhelming challenges, nonprofits and outreach programs work tirelessly to provide shelter, food, and addiction recovery services for the homeless. Organizations like the Homeless Empowerment Program, HEP, Camilla's House, and Miami Rescue Mission have helped thousands find refuge from the streets, offering meals, medical care, and long-term rehabilitation options. Some shelters focus on job training, giving individuals the skills they need to rebuild their lives. But these programs are stretched thin, facing limited funding and overwhelming demand. Yet, their commitment remains unwavering. They fight for every life, knowing that even one success story is a victory against the system's failures. Breaking free. Stories of survival and redemption. Among the masses struggling for survival, some have beaten the odds, proving that escaping homelessness isn't impossible, but the path is brutal. People like Eric, once lost to addiction, found refuge through recovery programs, battled his demons, and now helps others find their way out. Maria, a single mother who once lived in a shelter, secured stable housing after months of hardship and now advocates for policy reform. Each survivor's story is a testament to resilience, yet most would never have escaped without outside help. The harsh reality: hope is not enough without action. For every story of success, thousands remain trapped, unable to break free without systemic change. Shelters can only do so much, and without government intervention, affordable housing, and mental health reform, homelessness will continue to escalate. Advocates stress that real transformation requires more than temporary aid. It demands long-term solutions, policy shifts, and societal awareness. The streets should not be home for anyone, yet Florida's current system offers few alternatives. The question isn't whether recovery is possible, it's whether we, as a society, will create more paths for it. Until policymakers act, the streets will remain filled with suffering, waiting for the change that may never come. Florida's streets tell a story, one of struggle, resilience, and a system that has failed its people. Homelessness isn't just numbers on a report. It's lives interrupted, futures stolen, and dreams lost in the chaos of survival. Addiction, mental health battles, and systemic neglect have turned sidewalks into homes, alleys into shelters, and survival into an everyday war. But despite the darkness, there is hope. Organizations fighting for change, individuals proving recovery is possible, and a chance for society to finally act before it's too late. The real question isn't whether this crisis will end, but whether we will choose to end it. Will we keep walking past, pretending not to see? Or will we demand better, fight harder, and refuse to let human lives be discarded? The streets should not be home. The suffering should not be ignored. And change should not be a distant dream. It must start now.